I want to thank my two little girls who are just amazing, and look at the way that they have been hawking this book around. And if you can look these beauties in the eyes and say no, we want 10 books. Okay, that is your mission, and then Daddy will buy you an ice cream. Okay, very good.
2 ice creams.
She's such a leader and dealer. I'm not going to speak for very long, but I do just want to say something about why I wrote the book, because it was when I was with the girls that I came up with the inspiration for the book, and it was on a trip to Disneyland Paris in spring 2015 when we went over there, and they have this fabulous exhibition over there on the history of animation. The history of animation, it's a fabulous thing, and they had in there, hang on a sec, where is it? They had one of these things. This is a thaumatrope. It's a 19th century device that was invented by a guy called John Ayrton Paris to demonstrate the phenomenon of persistence of vision, where a vision will stay in our mind after we've stopped looking in it. So what you have is you have one image on one side and then one image on the other. And so typically you see this where you have a bird on one side and then you have a cage on the other side of the image, and then you spin it around like that and the two blur into one. And the one that I have here is of Alice and a toadstool, not my Alice, but Alice in Wonderland, you know, that one. And then on the other side you have a picture of a caterpillar smoking something which looks very interesting. Very interesting. And if you spin it around, the two things blur together. And I just thought this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about metaphor. And whether you're talking about, you know, the financial storm or the Iron Curtain, or you're talking about cyberspace. Isn't cyberspace a fantastic metaphor? You know, where we launch our navigators and go flying around in this strange zone where we'll land on particular sites, and sometimes they'll crash and we'll follow hyperlinks. And if you speak to someone, they'll often say, oh, while they're on their phone, they'll often say, oh my God, it felt like I was in another world. You know, and we have this whole idea that we're inhabiting this weird world of cyberspace. We always talk about it. It's up there, don't we? We put things. So please do post things up on Facebook tonight. Why do we say that? We all conceive it's up there, right? If you try saying to someone, I'm going to put something down on Facebook tonight, and look at you like you're insane. And that is because the idea is so completely meshed. And so anyway, there I was, Disneyland Paris, looking at this thaumatrope and thinking, that is it, that is the perfect metaphor for a metaphor. And then we were driving back, and we drove back, and we were going along the A10 in northern France. And I don't know whether any of you have been on this road, or in particular you went along this road in 2015 or 2016, because as we were driving along there, we got stuck in a traffic jam. And we were stuck in a traffic jam alongside a site I never thought that I would see in Europe. And it was 14-foot high barbed wire fences and lots of little black children with their faces pressed against that fence, and I could see the Red Cross were active in there, and literally they had begging bowls. And the girls, not unsurprisingly, were saying, what's that, Daddy? And the first things that came to my mind was, oh, that will be the Calais jungle. And I thought, well, I'm not going to use that disgusting language. And that is the language that we all came to conceptualize. A refugee camp, the thaumatrope. Ladies and gentlemen, on one side of the thaumatrope, we have vulnerable people who are fleeing wars that were largely created by us. On the other side, I'm not going to get political at all. Oh, shit. What did you expect? On the other side, we have a dark, forbidden place full of animals, full of vermin, all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, my God, that is so wrong, that term, the Calais jungle. And then I get back home, within 2 weeks, the wonderful Katie Hopkins has written her article for The Sun, talking about cockroaches. Show me the dead bodies. I don't care, they're cockroaches. 2 weeks after that, the compassionate Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron comes out and talks about a swarm of refugees in Calais. And then, as if that weren't enough, a certain Donald Trump throws his hat in the ring to be President of the United States with a launch speech in which he speaks about migrants as snakes. And I know this language, I've studied this language for years. This is the language that Hitler used in the 30s. It's the language that the Hutu used against the Tutsis in Rwanda. And it's the language that kills. And for anyone who doubted that, because I do have a tendency to hyperbole, as anyone who will know, you will all remember on September the 6th, when the image went round the world of a little 3-year-old Syrian refugee, the same age as little Alice was at the time, and he had washed up on the shore. And this image went round the world, and this was one person. It was, yes, it personified the thing. There were 30,000 people have died making that journey across the Mediterranean. And I thought, my God, this is a book that I have to write. And so I have been in a dark place. And I undertook this quest, really, to find other examples. And it was like a Dan Brown quest, actually, where it started in the Vatican Library. And I found a picture of Christian rhetoric that features from a book, a 16th century book called Christian Rhetoric, which appears at the start of my book. And I kind of worked my way through it, and I found all of these metaphors that have been used to dehumanize people for thousands of years. Sick people are vegetables, the poor people are dirt, immigrants have always been vermin, and women have always been bitches. And this is language that you see being repeated all over the place on a day-by-day basis, whether or not it's in gangster rap songs or whether or not it's in reports on the front page of the Financial Times, which talk about how Theresa May doggedly will get stuck into negotiations, or how she had a tendency to bark at her officials at the Home Office, which is language which I never saw being used about David Cameron. And not only is it that language is used to dehumanise people, but on the other side you see language being used to deify people. So yes, entertainers are stars. Why the hell? I don't know crap about Bono or what he thinks, and yet we all will bow down in worship at these stars. People with money are angels, business angels, and increasingly, of course, we're talking about the tech gods, people who are right up there. And so this was the mission. And the thing is that this is not just about language. There's research which shows, cognitive scientists, cognitive linguists are absolutely clear about the link between the way we speak, the way we feel, the way we act. And this is what heaps of the research in the book has shown time and time again. And so, for instance, people who associate women with animals are more likely to sexually assault women, more likely to rape women, more likely to take a sympathetic view of men who are charged with rape. The US Army introduced dehumanization as a strategy for their soldiers after World War II. The firing rate for soldiers at the end of World War II was 15%. By the Korean War, that had risen to 65%. By Vietnam, it was 95%. You had soldiers going through the jungle, literally shooting down children and shouting, "Snake!" after they've done it. And I have testimony from soldiers who were out there reporting exactly that sort of thing in the book. Or it's not just on the war zone. We get it right here as well with everyday political decisions and public policy decisions. So one of the cases that I've looked at quite closely in the book was this case of Alfie Evans, the little boy in Alderhay Hospital who was in a coma, and he was obviously in a terrible condition. He had what doctors called an unknown degenerative neurological condition. That doesn't roll off the tongue very easily, so much easier to just say that the boy's in a semi-vegetative state. I did some research in the book where I checked the power of that phrase. My hunch was that this phrase, vegetative, is going to lead people to want to end his life. And indeed, what I found was that simply swapping those phrases with people, we did 100 people with either phrase, it doubled the amount of people. That is the power of metaphor, and we see this time and time again, and it affects all of us, all of our perception of the world. And so these are the very cheerful issues that I have addressed. Anyway, and it does, but I mean the thing is that when we're considering the value of life, and we understand a lot more about instinctive bias now and the way these things kind of come into play, this all has such a bearing. The words that we use really do matter, and I think that underlying this lies the root cause of a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world now, whether you're looking at things like Brexit or Trump or the growth of nationalism in Europe or here or wherever. And I think, do you remember the parachute test? where you have a plane coming down. You've got to decide who gets the parachute. And this, I think, is what it all comes down to. And I think that this is what the book really comes back to, this idea that you have a plane where the engines have conked out, and there are 4 people on the plane, but just 3 parachutes. And so I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine this, right? First person steps forward, says, "My name is Bill Gates. I'm the 2nd richest man on the planet, and with my foundation, I am going to wipe out malaria, wipe out cholera, wipe out TB. My life should be saved." And he grabs the parachute, jumps out the plane. The second man steps forward and says, "My name is President Donald J. Trump, and I am the smartest president in the history of the United States. My life should be saved." And he grabs a pack. He jumps out. The third man steps forward and he picks up a parachute and he gives it to the 4th passenger, who's a 10-year-old girl with big brown eyes, 10-year-old Indian girl with big brown eyes. And he gives the parachute to her. And he says, "I am Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church, the largest religious group in the world. My people need me, but I am old, and you are young, and therefore it is your life that should be saved." And the little girl says, "Thank you very much indeed, Pope Francis, but there's no need to worry. The smartest president in the history of the United States just jumped out with my rucksack." There we go. And that's what the whole book leads you to. A great example of bathos there for the rhetorical geeks in the audience. But, you know, seriously, this is what this book is. This is a book which is a fight back. It is a fight back against the language of people like Trump, Farage, Hopkins, and everyone else who's on James's roster. This is my response, and I'm pleased that there is a place on the roster for people like me. But this is the thing, that for all of the talk about post-truth, alternative facts, and all of this stuff, for me, the biggest lie that is out there is this idea that there are some people on this planet who are not human. You know, there are no bitches, there's no scum, there's no vegetables. We are all human, and the first way to preserve our humanity is to assert our humanity. That was the rhyme, which must mean it's time to end. Thank you very much indeed.